updates, which are the ones that are actually most important to me, or just most important for my business and for me instance. So yeah, thank you all for joining. If you haven't heard of us before, we're Clevertouch Consulting. We started in 2009. We're based out of Winchester in the UK, and we were, just as you see there, creative exclusively with Martech in mind, especially where the landscape can be so broad in terms of marketing technology. This is our focus, this is our specialty, and we're literally here to help you make sense of Martech. So a couple of little bits about us. So we, as a consultancy, we came in and we developed what you might have already heard as the Martech Spine philosophy. So a set of key technology types that you need within your business, within your stack, to really understand how customers are moving through your interactions. Something some of you might not have known about us is that we were actually a consultancy that brought Pardot to Europe, brought Pardot to market in Europe rather. So we were at the forefront of there. Where we are in Winchester, we hold over 70 Marketing Cloud certifications. And yes, we've pretty much been a partner with Salesforce since we first became a thing. So about us, my name's Chris Fowler, so I'm the head of training here at Clevertouch. And I am ably joined by Paul Shefferd, who is our lead Martech trainer and our lead Marketing Cloud Account Engagement consultant. So yes, for those of you that said you came to join to like Paul, don't you worry, he's right here. So we've got plenty to get through. What we'll do is show you what's going to come up. And what I'd like to emphasize before we get going is that if you haven't used Butter before, so this lovely shiny platform that you're all in now, you've got the ability to, on the left-hand side of your screen, you can, as you've seen some others do, you can react to kind of what we're saying, a thumbs up or a party emoji. It's all good. You can also just press the numbers on your number pad on your keyboard, 1 to 0, and that will give us the corresponding reaction. We have got a Q&A section right at the end of this. So if you want to hold your questions for the end, what you can do in the meantime, open the chat, which you can do so on the left-hand side. Open the chat up, pop your question in there as well, and we'll get, we'll be able to get to those at the end or throughout if it's on the topic we're kind of talking about. So yeah, with that in mind, Paul, I'm going to hand over to you, my friend.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Chris. So welcome everybody. A lot of familiar faces, so lovely to see you all again, and a few new faces too, so welcome. It's been an interesting year in terms of releases into the platform. So you'll be able to see at the top in a moment. We're only going to cover in about 20 minutes all of the key things that have happened. So I'm going to cover things at a really high level, but it's going to start hopefully getting you to think about what's new, what can we use it for. So there's been some interesting changes. So probably the most significant for everybody is the Engagement Studio wait times, which is just released now. There has been something launched this year called the Account Optimizer, which we're still seeing people starting to discover, but is a really, really useful tool that could really have some significant implications. And we're going to go through that here today. External actions is something kind of huge that no one's really making a lot of noise about. And so we're going to start to broach that topic today. And there's been some security improvements as well that we'll get to towards the end of the slides here today. And as Chris mentioned, we will have a Q&A, so I'm going to move through quite quickly. If you do have any questions that pop up, as Chris mentioned, you can just pop them in the chat. And when we get to the end, we will go through those and answer them right here today as long as we can. So with that said, let us move on to some of our new releases. So the releases reviewed in here, so we've marketed it as it's everything that's come out in 2023. So we're going right back to the start of the year with some of the spring 23 features, the summer 23 release, which was back in May and June, and then most recently, all the shiniest and newest features are those winter 24 releases, which is basically just finished releasing this week, last week, so between October the 7th and 27th. So there'll be hopefully some stuff in here that is brand new and hopefully is of some use. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Engagement Studio. Now, the Engagement Studio is something that pretty much everybody uses, or an awful lot of people use. It's something people have been moving towards. It's a little bit complex sometimes, can feel a little bit scary, but it is a very, very useful tool in building these customized journeys for your customers based on when they engage. But one of the biggest limitations that a lot of marketers experience with the Engagement Studio is that everything, if I want to put any sort of delay on an activity, so for example, if I open up here and we're going to put a new action, previously when we've gone to put in any sort of wait, we're talking days. And the smallest wait time I can put on anything is days. I can't delay people for anything shorter than that. I can pick some wait time between 1 day and 365 days. If I want to do anything shorter than that, unfortunately, until now, I've been out of luck. And one thing they have changed, it was literally just changed in winter 24. So as of this month, we now have the ability, at the moment, only on email sending steps, but we can now put wait steps of hours on our email sends. Now, it's interesting. The window for this is actually between 2 and 8 hours. So we may see at some point that either, between 8 and 24, we still can't do anything less than 2 hours. But we do now have the ability to control with a little bit more accuracy our email sending flows. Now, you might be wondering what the significance of that is. Well, some people will probably immediately have things come to the forefront of their mind in terms of, oh, that's good. I can already think about things I can do here. But just as an example of something that we can now start to do is, this is our first opportunity outside of using something like Einstein send time optimization, which not everyone is using or is comfortable using. It's not the right tool for everybody. For the first time, we now have control over perhaps being able to optimize our sends for time zones. So as an example here, this is a very, very lightweight version, just as a bit of a demonstration. I can set up a dynamic list that contains the sending time zone plus 2 hours, and I can roughly group my people into those sort of lists based on where they are. And so my people that are in the UK time zone, they're going to go into my normal send here. My people that are 2 hours ahead, +2 or behind, I can then sort them, and they will then wait 2 hours and then be sent the email. So we can start to think about, if we're sending all across Europe, we've got multiple time zones. Even if we're going global, we've got lots of time zones. We can start to put together these more useful customer journeys that are closer to when they're going to want to receive the emails, rather than just trying to pick a single time that might work best for a global audience. So that's our significance here. So it's a nice problem. I'm sure a lot of people will immediately start thinking of ways they can use this. So that's one that a lot of people are really enjoying. As of right now, it is only on the email send. That's the only wait period we have affected. However, it is potentially in discussion. They're potentially looking at whether or not it would work on other wait activities. So nothing confirmed, but we've seen it once. It wouldn't surprise me if at some point in the near future we're going to see this pop up on other actions as well. So we'll keep you posted on that. So that's probably been the biggest change in terms of working in the platform and building. And Chris, I'm just going to pause at this moment, because my next question and the next topic we're going to talk about is something new, which is called the Account Optimizer. But before I jump into that, we'd like to ask you guys all the question: how fast do you find your Pardot instance? When you're working in the platform, when you're building your dynamic lists, when you're doing your data uploads, when you're doing email sends, what kind of experience do you have in terms of speed? I'm just going to wait for about 10 seconds here. Bit of a mixture. Quite slow at times in the chat. Yeah, lags a bit. Cool. So a little bit of spread around. Okay, pretty good. It lags a bit, but no one's gone super speedy. So I'm sure the next bit that I'm going to talk about, everybody will be able to get on board with. So the next topic, and for me, I think one of the best releases of this year has been something called the Account Optimizer. Now, it is hidden away in the account engagement settings area of the platform, which is why I didn't lead with it, because I'm sure not everybody who's joining us today has access to this. But somebody in your organization will, and it could really, really give you some really useful insights into what's going on in your Pardot instance. So this is what the Account Optimizer looks like. And very broadly speaking, it kind of has two main uses. The first of which is identifying configuration issues. So this is going to pick out anything that is really, really wrong with your instance that you may not have noticed. So this can be something like a connector that's not working properly at the moment. It will also show you things like if you've got any emails that are set up to send from an unverified sender, or perhaps somebody who's left the business who no longer exists. So it will help you pick out those things that are very easy to miss, but will cause a very poor experience for your customers and cause frustrations for yourselves working in the platform. The second main function of the account optimizer is in the name. It's to help you optimize the performance and hopefully speed it up slightly from what you're currently noticing. So a lot of people saying it seems okay, it lags a bit. No one went super speedy, and this is the first time since as long as we've had Pardot, we've never been able to really see what's behind the curtain in terms of why am I seeing these struggles. So there's a few different ways that it's approaching this. There is something here called the prospect change monitor, and this will show you your processing power and what's taking all of the processing, what's happening in the background that's using up all of your allocation. And so you can see in my instance, 39.5% of what's happening in my instance is my dynamic lists. So as you working with dynamic lists, they're constantly reviewing the whole database. So that's a lot of power they're taking up. 30% is my automation rules. So I've got a lot of automation rules that are currently reviewing the database. They're taking a lot of power. I have my Salesforce connector. I have imports that are making up 11%. So you can see that these categories, and this will be the same for most people's instances, it's usually dynamic lists and automation rules that are taking up a lot of space and a lot of power. And in the near future, we're seeing a lot of AI features being released into the Salesforce space. We haven't got anything confirmed, as far as I know, for Pardot, for account engagement at the moment. But those generative AI tools are also going to require a lot of processing power. And so starting to think ahead now, doing a bit of spring cleaning, tidying up your instance a bit, is going to free up processing power for, first of all, your active marketing. So it's going to make your dynamic lists run a little bit faster. It's going to make your email sends go out a bit quicker. It's going to make sure that your engagement studios start faster. You'll notice it all over the place, but it's also going to free up power for if those generative AI tools arrive and hopefully make them a bit nicer to use. So in terms of how you can actually apply this information, one thing they've added, particularly where it's often dynamic lists and automation rules, they've added these maintenance resources down the bottom here. And so you'll see that down the bottom, I appreciate it might be quite small on the screen, it says inactive automation rules, inactive dynamic lists, and unused dynamic lists. Now, what this is pulling out is those high dependency tools that aren't currently being used in a very effective way. This is going to be very small as I hover over it, but an inactive automation rule is defined as any automation rule that has not had any activity in the last 30 days. So it's switched on, it's using processing power because it's constantly listening to everyone, but it's not done anything in 30 days. So potentially it's just wasting power. Inactive dynamic lists are very similar. So these are reviewing the whole database, but they haven't had a prospect added or removed in the last 30 days. So they're not actually really being dynamic at the moment. And we also have unused dynamic lists. So these are dynamic lists that are not currently being used for anything. They're taking up processing power, but we're not sending to them. They're not being used in engagement studios. We're not using them to filter anywhere else. And they're taking up power. And if you click one of these, it will actually take you directly to your view. So it's jumped me right into my list area. And I can now see that my unused dynamic lists, so here's all the dynamic lists in here, none of these are being used at the moment. And in the same way, I also, and this will apply, you can see this directly from your segmentation lists area. I have my inactive dynamic lists. I don't have any, but that would also show you the same list. And one thing you can do, you don't have to delete your dynamic lists anymore. As of the summer release, what I can do with a dynamic list, and I can do this for multiple at the same time, is I can convert them to static lists. So if you have old dynamic lists that you used for a send way back when, and you're keeping on to that list of people because you're like, I may need this again at some point, it's great. You can convert them to a static list. So you keep the list of people, but they're going to stop taking up all that processing power and your instance will become faster. So it's the same in here. Dynamic list is also under automation rules. If I go into automation rules, I have this drop down for inactive rules. Again, I don't have any in my instance, but take a look in yours. You don't need access to the optimizers to do that. But that's going to make a big difference to your experience. And then hopefully, when you come back to your optimizer after making a few changes, you'll see a different distribution. And what we really want to see is that the more active things like our imports, our connector, our engagement studios, like things that we are using, we want to see that be a bigger proportion of that pie. So yeah, jumping back in there. So that's our account optimizer. And this deck will be available after. It's just what they've added, when and who it's available for. And I've put a little bit of a thought in there about why you would care, why it's important to you. So hopefully everyone can see that could be a really useful tool for almost everyone who has access to it. So hoping everyone sees some use in that. Again, I'm going to take a quick pause here because the next topic is a really big one. And Chris, I hope you don't mind popping up our question for this one. Has anybody heard of external actions? They've been on the platform for about a year now. Have you heard of them? Are you using them? It's a surprise. A good amount of people already using them. It's more than we thought. It's not something a lot of people are using. But still a good portion of not yet or what are they? Cool. Let's answer those questions. So external actions are our next topic here. So external actions are huge, and we are planning on doing some more content in the space on this in the near future. So keep your eye out for that. But external actions have really taken the lid off of Pardot. So previously, when we've looked at connecting things to account engagement, I should really say, when we've looked at connecting things to account engagement, we've had our connectors that are available, but we have these kind of pre-configured connectors that we're allowed to use, and we're kind of limited to an extent. What we now have under marketing setup, open this up, we now have what we call marketing app extensions or external actions. Now, these are difficult to set up, and this is why we'll do a much larger piece on this. But what I want to make you aware of is that an external action allows you to push Pardot data to a third-party platform. Now, the most significant part of this is that this is basically opening up Pardot to be able to send things like an SMS message. I could collect phone numbers, and if I have an SMS sending third-party piece of software, when someone submits a form, I can push the correct information into my third-party software from Pardot and send that person an SMS. So we're opening up channels. Could be for more simple things. It can be for things like registering somebody for a webinar, but it could perhaps be for something that we don't have a connector for. So it opens it up to almost any webinar hosting platform. It could be, I don't know, something like in certain scenarios, you may want to, I don't know, post something to Asana when somebody completes an action. And it could even be something working within Salesforce. So you could directly create an account, for example. They really are very, very powerful. It does require a developer, someone who can write a bit of Apex code. So there's a little bit of a bridge to cross there, but they've opened up Pardot massively. And so, yeah, if you are interested, start looking into them or come talk to us about them. We're really excited by the possibilities here and what they could do, because they now allow you to connect to pretty much any third-party software that gives you access to the API. So as a follow-up question, Chris, if you'd be so kind, do you guys think you'd have a use for external actions? Not possibly, it's good. Lovely. Good one to be aware of, as I say. You just want to start thinking about, and we've not seen an awful lot of people talking about it or making noise in the space, but they are very, very exciting. There's also something called external activities, which lets you pull in information from external software too. So you can put information both ways now. The platform has become a lot more flexible as a result. Thank you very much. So, moving on to some of the slightly more finicky stuff. This is something else that's come up in Winter 24. This is something called restricted domains. So Pardot have been getting increasingly prudent about their security, particularly around the platform and what people can and can't do around it. And one thing they've just introduced is the ability to restrict iframing. So for those of you that aren't aware or perhaps aren't doing this, you can take your forms that you make in account engagement and you can display them on an external web page, and that can be done using what's called an iframe, which basically loads a version of the form on your outside web page. Until now, that has been you've been able to do that freely. You can take that page and use it wherever you like. And they've added what is a relatively niche setting, but you can now restrict and say that actually I only want my form to appear on these websites. And it's under the account settings, and if I click edit, if I scroll down a little bit here, you'll see that we have this iframed assets option, and by default you'll be set to don't restrict. In my case, I've restricted to these domains. So I've restricted to clever-touch.com, which is our website. And this is now me saying that actually, I don't want my assets to display on anybody else's website. It's something you can do really quickly. It's something that takes very, very little time to do. You just have to type your domain in and approve it, and it will stop your forms appearing anywhere else. Now, it's probably why people would put your forms somewhere else. I don't know. Some of you may have enemies, but this will prevent those forms rendering anywhere unsafe. It's a good way of protecting your forms, protecting yourself against potential bot submissions in other bits of software. So all you have to do is come into your account settings, click edit, and just enter in your approved domain down here. Or domains, you can put in multiple. Just conscious of time, so I will keep moving here. This is one that I can't demo because it hasn't quite appeared in my developer org at the moment. This is something they've added again in the very much in the channel of wanting to speed up an instance. Up until now, when somebody is cookied, when they are a visitor, when they go through your web pages or your landing pages and they accept cookies, account engagement will retain that information for up to 10 years. You can actually change that window, but you can extend it out to up to 10 years. Now you can imagine over those 10 years, the amount of people that you may pick up and be storing data on is really significant. And you can have these huge data banks in the background of all these people that went through your web pages and were never seen again. And it's all just data that's being held onto and is slowing the instance up. Soon in the platforms, we will see in the business unit settings. So it will be, again, in this same area here. So you're under your account settings, would click edit, and it'll be somewhere in here. You will be able to get rid of any of that old visitor data that never became a known prospect. It won't get rid of anyone who's not at least a year old. So you're not going to clear out anything important, but it's all those people that clicked on a web page and you've never seen again. You can now delete their tracking data. If they come back, they can re-accept cookies. We can pick them up again. It just clears out what is essentially useless data to free up processing. And very finally, this is more of a please make sure and have a look to see if you've done this. The deadline for this was the 18th of October this year. Eventually, you would have seen on your homepage when you logged in, you would have had a big banner at the top above your dashboard here that was warning you to please choose. Oh, my lights have turned off. Let's see if I get this back on. There we go. Motion controlled lights, everybody. You did have a warning that you had to choose a field to control with when you were using the opted out field. So you had to decide whether your opt out data was going to be controlled in Salesforce or controlled in Pardot. You can now use the most recently updated field. So now 3 options. Hopefully you've already done this. If not, please make sure that you head into your account engagement settings area under object and field configurations, and you will have a default field called opted out, which will have to have a sync behavior. If you did not define this year, your sync will have stopped. So your opt-out data will no longer be shared between Pardot and Salesforce. And so you are losing vital consent information between your platforms. So please make sure you go in and update this, choose which field will control your sync, and make sure that you do have a value in here, because otherwise people are going to opt out in Pardot and you will not see it in Salesforce. And I've run slightly over, my apologies. That brings me to the end of my presentation. Cool. So yeah, we'll pop up a quick poll here for all of you, so you can all just type things in here. So I'm hoping that this has got you starting to think. These are the important updates. There's been very little else in terms of big features released. But is there anything else that you'd like to learn more about? So from those features, is there anything you'd like to do more with? And while people are typing that out, we open up our chat. See what people said. Could you use it to send data to LinkedIn paid advertising platform or Google PPC? Chris, thank you for answering that one. Yes. So the question, for the sake of the recording, could you use it to send data to LinkedIn paid advertising platform or a Google PPC? Yes, as long as you have access to the API for that. Yes, you can. If your Einstein's not switched on, can you switch it on just for account engagement so you can access that AI capability, subject lines, email body copy, etc.? I would be surprised if you can only switch it on for account engagement. As far as I've seen, Einstein is controlled in Lightning, which with the Salesforce single sign-on now, you'd grant access in Salesforce. So I believe you can't just switch that on for account engagement. Shrada, will the recording be shared? Yep, this recording will be shared, as will the slide deck. You'll have access to all of this after. Cool, that's all the questions in the chat. Anyone else? Any other questions while we're all here?
If it happens that, and I know happens to me, as soon as we close the webinar, you're like, I had about 3 questions I had to ask. So if you do, if it does come to the end afterwards, don't worry, our email address is there in the middle. So training@clever-touch.com. We're also going to be sending rounds, as Paul mentioned there, we're going to send around a recap of this as well. So that will also include a summary, including the slides. It will include the recording, so you can watch it back as well. But also on the summary, what it's going to have is essentially a link to a form where if you want to get in touch with us, if for specifically some of the things that Paul's talked about today, so like external actions, it can be such a big deal. They take a bit of work, a bit of thinking, scoping, but they could add a lot of data enrichment to what you've already got. Then if you're just not sure, you just want to talk about them, reach out to us. You'll have that available to you as part of the recap. But no, thanks to everybody who's been filling out the poll. And yeah, just letting us know. Let us know how you're feeling about it all. I think it's really interesting to see how you feel about like the speed of how fast Pardot is, etc., etc. So yeah, no, it's been great. Cool. Yeah. Any final questions? No. Cool. Lots of thank yous coming into the chat. No, thank you.
That's good. Thank you, everyone. It's
Great.
lovely to see you again, those of you that I've seen before.
Absolutely. No, fantastic. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for joining again. And yeah, hopefully we will see you on the next one. Take care now.
See you guys.